Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today we got a wonderful guest and a great friend. This is Karen Ramsey. Hello, Karen. How are you?
Hello, Paul. How are you? Nice to be with you.
Yes, Karen, I interview a lot of people, and it just seems like a lot of the people I interview about a raw food diet and being raw foodist, especially 100% are men. Uh, you're eating a raw food diet now for how long?
30 years this
30
year.
years. Because you and I started this together. I know you from New York, and I want to talk about that today. Everybody, this is Karen Ramsey, and I'm going to put her website below where you can contact her. But Karen, how was your life growing up, and what inspired you to go to a raw vegan diet, and what inspires you to stay on this diet? So let's start off with how you grew up. Did you grow up into health, or was it something that happened later in life?
Well, I did not grow up into health. However, I had a couple of excellent role models. Even though I was raised on a standard American diet and was sick all the time as a child. But my father and my paternal grandmother, they ate very differently than my sister, my mother, and I. My grandmother was very sick in 1921. She had asthma and emphysema. She was in the hospital. The doctor said she only had a few months to live because her emphysema was so serious. They gave her whatever drugs they had and didn't help. And they told her that they weren't able to do anything for her and that she would only live most likely another few months and that she should get her things together. Well, my grandmother was very scared because my father was only 4 years old and she did not have any relatives in the area and she did not know what she was going to do. So, um, Margaret Mead says it's easier to change your religion than to change your diet. And I think that's true for most people. They are not willing to change their diet no matter what. But my grandmother had my father to consider, and she was willing to do anything. And she got a little book that was given to her while she was in the hospital called The Mucusless Diet Healing System. It came out only a few years before in 1918. And she read that little paperback book, and it changed the course of her life forever and my father's life. She healed very quickly going to plant foods, her asthma and her emphysema. So I mean, I was very young at the time that she lived with us in later years, but I did hear her healing story. And she did tell me that in 1921, she left the hospital, she went home, she got off the animal food, she stopped cooking everything. And my father and my grandmother, I still remember growing up watching them eat. They ate differently than anybody else. They ate fruits and veggies during the day. And for dinner, they had a big salad with some steamed veggies. And that was how they lived. They did not go to doctors. They had a garden. They lived completely naturally. They were the only people I knew growing up in the 50s and 60s who lived naturally, who were outside all the time in nature. I remember my father sitting outside without a shirt and feeding the squirrels. And like animals just seemed to flock to him. They just seemed to know that he was a gentle, kind person. And he did not believe in eating animals. My grandmother wrote a lot of poetry. I still have her poems about a natural food lifestyle. This was years before the words vegan and raw even came into
So that affected
existence.
you because you heard the stories about them and you saw them, and that affected h- your decision. So what age were you when you said, "Hey, I'm going to eat like them"?
Well, already at age 17, I love the way that they connected with other creatures that we share the planet with. And I watched my mother killing every insect, and she was afraid of spiders, and she would kill everything with a fly swatter. And my father would take the little spiders and the ants in a tissue outside. So I saw this very gentle way of living with other creatures, and I wanted that for myself. However, I was so addicted to the dairy. My favorite foods were cheddar cheese and cheese doodles, and I would binge on them. And I didn't want to give them up. And then when I was an adolescent, I got cystic acne all over my face and my back, and the dermatologist told me it was genetic. But there was nobody in my family that had cystic acne, but they told me that it was hereditary. So I wanted to believe it because I didn't want to change my diet. But I did become a vegetarian because of the animals. I didn't want to eat animals anymore. And I didn't realize that the dairy was so harmful to animals. My father did talk to me about it, but I ignored it because I didn't want to give up the dairy. And it wasn't until much later when I had my own children and my second child was very sick with asthma and chronic ear infections that I started to make the changes. Firstly, I went vegan in 1989. Now, he was born in 1990, but I was still, I think I was still detoxing a lot of stuff that I had eaten. And I also was eating all processed foods, or mostly processed vegan
So
foods.
even though you were a vegetarian, you were doing like a junk food vegetarian diet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I lived on pastas and breads.
Yeah. So a lot of grains and
Yeah.
flour.
So
Okay.
even when I got off of the dairy, which was that was the most difficult for me, was the dairy. But once I went vegan in 1989 and I got rid of the dairy, I went to the pastas and the breads and I just ate them all the time. That was my lunch. It was my dinner. For breakfast, it was like empty cereal cooked at high temperatures, which I know now causes acrylamides in foods. I wasn't getting very much nutrition and I wasn't giving very much nutrition to my kids at that time. And my son was sick. And the next 3 years of his life, his first 3 years, we were in and out of the hospital. And it was scary. I would sleep with him on top of me at night because I was scared about his breathing, wheezing all night. We'd take him into the shower for respiration. It was a very scary time for me. And in 1994, I just said, no more. No more. I had started researching myself. I had found raw food. I started communicating with people online, like Dr. Doug Graham, and then later went down to Florida to see him at his chiropractic office in 1995. And I transitioned my kids and myself to a raw vegan lifestyle. And my cystic acne, for over 25 years, I had severe cystic acne, taking all these drugs, prednisone for 6 years, a dangerous drug called Accutane to dry my skin. And it said on the box that if you give this to a pregnant woman, it will kill the fetus. That's what it said on the box. And I took that drug frequently. So because of the drugs and the skin issues, I also had gut issues. I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And when I went raw in 1994, in 3 months, my skin was completely clean. It had already started improving in 1989 when I went vegan and gave up the dairy. That was huge. But even the scarring went away in 1994 when I went raw vegan. And I
Wow.
wasn't even eating that healthy raw. I was eating a lot of fat.
Raw food
I
junk.
went in eating loads of nuts, oil, everything. Too much. But my skin still healed and my digestion still improved just by adding an abundance of fresh whole plant foods. And it was amazing to me. And then my son's asthma was gone in like 10 months, completely gone. His ear infections, the doctors were telling us that he'd need tubes in his ears. The ear infections were gone. So it blew me away, and it kept me on a mission to help other people. And I ended up writing books. My first book, Creating Healthy Children, came out in 2010. I've written 3 other books. I wrote a recipe book for families, which is really for everybody. It has 115 healthy recipes that don't have any junk in them, because there can even be raw junk. Um, then I wrote a book about autism, Heal and Prevent Autism, because in addition to health coaching, I've also been a speech and language pathologist for over 43 years. And I found that this raw food lifestyle helps kids with autism. I worked as a speech pathologist for 43 years, and the last 20 of those 43 years, I worked at a autism continuum program in the public schools. And I didn't see progress with speech therapy and physical therapy and occupational therapy. But I did see it when I took children to whole plant foods and raw. And,
Amazing,
and it's
amazing.
amazing to me. And then my last book is my story and my guidelines for healing the skin. And it's called Bye Bye Acne. And that just came out this year.
Nice, nice. So after eating this way for so long, tell us, do you ever get your blood tested, or do you ever run into any sicknesses? Tell us how the process has been like after being this long on a diet.
Yes. So, I mean, I have made mistakes. I listened to a lot of misinformation at the beginning. Um, you and I, we started in New York City with a raw food group there, and there was a lot of misinformation floating around, and even some of the educators, some of those early educators. I listened to a lot of misinformation about, that we don't need to brush our teeth, we don't need to practice dental hygiene. I really harmed myself and my kids by listening to that misinformation. So we did have dental problems. And once you enter the dental world, once you start getting cavities filled and all that, you're in the dental world. And we had, beautiful teeth. And because of that misinformation, it led us down not a very good path. So we've gotten it under control, but a lot of people listen to that misinformation. And I have still seen that floating around, that we don't really, that raw foods are so beneficial to the teeth that we don't need to practice dental hygiene. That is not true. So that's one thing. And then I was eating a lot of fat. So I didn't feel the energy that I feel now. Um, Going into my menopause years, I'm 70 in about a week and a half, and I have unbelievable energy. I've never had a hot flash. Uh, I just am happy. I don't get sick. When I ate a lot of cooked foods, I got sick. Even when I was vegan, I was sick a lot. So I don't like being sick.
Do you,
I
do you
like having my full energy.
and
And so,
do you check your blood work now?
yes, I do. And I was pretty happy with my last blood work. My B12 was a little bit low. I did try fasting, because sometimes I've read that the hydrochloric acid in the stomach maybe is not absorbing the B12. I've tried a few different things, but I just ended up taking a good quality B12 supplement. And when I did my blood work again, my B12 was up. Um, so yeah, and for D3 in the wintertime, I'll take D3, but I do have a retreat, a raw food retreat in Costa Rica in the winter. And that really helps to replenish my D3, because I'm outdoors in the sunshine the whole time and spend a good part of the winter down there. So sometimes I do okay with D3 without supplementing. But if I'm going to be in New Jersey or Colorado, the two places where I live, during the winter, I do supplement, even
Okay.
though I do know that we get a lot of other nutrients from the sun. So we really do need to be out in the sun. And I do recommend for people who live in northern climates to try to get away and take your vacation in the winter, not in the summer, and go to a tropical place.
Exactly. Well, you've been successful at doing this. I've been successful at doing this. Why do you think there's so few people that not only try a raw food diet, but stay with it for so long?
I think a big part of it is addiction. I've talked to probably hundreds of people, and I've also talked to people who have gone back even to eating meat. And they tell me that they just missed it too much. So I think that once you have been eating meat, it's very hard. There's a lot of things in meat and processed food that are added that make them even more addictive, even things like ice cream. There's a lot of salt in ice cream, making it so addictive. There's salt in cheeses. And just, I see so many kids growing up on processed foods, and it's really, really sad. We have more illnesses in children than ever before. And that's why, my first book, Creating Healthy Children, I address what we need to be feeding our kids in order for them to be healthy and vibrant and filled with energy and not sick all the time. I grew up sick all the time and on maintenance antibiotics. I'm surprised that I didn't have even worse gut issues than I did. I did have IBS, but when I went raw, like I've worked with some people, and I mean, you can totally relate to this because you experience colitis. It could take some people quite a long time to get well.
Sure, sure. And what about in terms of raising a family, children? Because it's one thing for you to make these changes, but then to have children growing up and feeding them healthy, vegan, or even raw. The common mistake a lot of new parents make that are excited about this, they definitely give their children too much dried fruit and definitely just give them the raw junk food, the raw snacks and everything
Yeah.
else. Do you think some cooked food from a social standpoint is better for young children and could be healthy enough if it's done in a healthy way, or do you recommend somebody bring their children up 100% raw or not?
Yeah. So, in the early years when I was raising my kids, I was concerned about my son's asthma coming back. So I kept my kids fully raw for 10 years. Now, they still went out and saw friends, so I can't say 100% that they were always raw at their friends' places, even though I did talk to the parents, as they were getting older and they perceived the need to fit in. I'm sure that they did eat some of those other foods. But I do believe that while we are the center of their universe, that we should be feeding them raw food, because I do believe that raw food is intact. Whereas once you heat it, it's no longer fully intact, that there are vitamins, minerals, antioxidants that are depleted once the cooking process. However, once they get older, there's also the emotional piece. And kids strive to fit in. And this is one area where if I had to go back and do it again, I think I would keep my home a raw home and just understand my kids' needs to fit in. There certainly would be boundaries no matter what. Like animal food, that's a big boundary. Animal food is not food. That's an animal who wants to live. So we believe in this on all levels. We believe in it for physical health, for mental, for emotional, and spiritual health. And spiritually, we do not believe in taking the life of an animal who also wants to live. And a mother, a cow, for example, is a mother who loves her children the same way that we love our children. So we respect that. So that's a big boundary. But in the older years, like in the adolescent and teen years, my kids did go out with friends and they did eat cooked food outside of the home. So in their earlier years, they were raw. I don't know when they started getting a little bit older, when they went with friends, but I can say that for 10 years in my home that they were raw. And I'm glad that I did raise them that way. My son's asthma did not come back. It didn't even come back when he started eating cooked food.
So where are
And
they
my
at now?
daughter has never eaten meat in her
Where are
life.
they? She's never eaten meat in her whole life? In her whole life.
Never.
Wow. Wow. But she hasn't necessarily been vegan. She just didn't eat meat.
Right.
Yeah.
She
Okay.
went more to vegetarian uh, in the teen years.
So how are your children doing now? Because I know they're older and I know Karen's children, everybody from when they were young, and I used to go to the house and I thought it was so cool that they were raw. So how are they now? How do they eat now? Because I know they're both excited about healthy fruits and vegetables. So how are they eating now?
Yeah, so they both eat still a large volume of fruits and vegetables. My son Marco took it to another level because I started doing raw food retreats, raw food and yoga retreats in Costa Rica 9 years ago. This January will be my ninth year doing a retreat there. And my kids started hosting the retreats with me. And my son fell in love with Costa Rica. So he moved to Costa Rica like maybe 4 years ago and has bought a piece of land where he has a farm and he grows a lot of fruit. He's got fruit trees. He's got like 100 fruit trees. He built a huge greenhouse and has a beautiful vegetable garden, eats a lot of his own food. I would say highly sustainable at this point. And so I'm very proud of him for what he's done. He's married to a vegan. My daughter, she also still eats quite healthy. She's not 100% vegan, but mostly vegan. And definitely vegetarian, has never eaten animal flesh her entire life. So, it gets to a point where we have to respect when they're in their adult years and they are choosing their partners. We can be an influence early on. And I'm a big influence in my grandchildren's life. They come to me like 3 to 4 days a week. So I'm a huge influence in their life and they love fruits and vegetables. So I'm very excited about that.
So one of the things I wanted you to explain is it's a big challenge when one spouse in the house is raw and the other one's not, or one's vegetarian, one's not. And so as you were getting into this, when you met your husband, were you vegetarian at the time? And like, did that have a factor in like your future with him? And how did that all work? And then when you went raw and he didn't, or like how does it work? And what do you recommend? What's your recommendation from experience with people that are in this? Because that's a tough one I find. People contact me and they say, "Oh, I got to make," like a lot of women will say, "Oh, I got to make two dinners because I got to make dinner for me and then dinner for my husband." And a lot of husbands will say, "Oh, I'm eating all healthy, but my wife doesn't eat healthy." So, how do you recommend all that and explain your experience with that?
Yeah, this is a tough question, Paul. It is really a tough question because I experienced this myself. I went, like, it just made so much sense to me to go raw vegan in 1994. Overnight, I went raw vegan overnight from mostly cooked food to all raw food the next day. I said goodbye to my addiction to bread the night before I went raw in February of 1994. I ate an entire loaf of almond butter and jelly sandwiches, and that was my goodbye to bread. I haven't had it in 30 years. And my husband was definitely not on board. He was very upset. Uh, he is half Colombian and half Swiss. And I would be really enjoying creating meals for him that were from his culture. And he loved that. They were very cheesy. I would not prepare meat, but I would prepare cheese for him because I was vegetarian. When I went vegan in 1989, he was not happy that I stopped preparing those foods, but I still was preparing cooked food like soups. He loves soups, so I made all these different vegan soups. When I went raw in 1994, that was totally different because I really wanted a raw home in order to help my son and myself to stay raw. But it was challenging. It was very challenging. There were a lot of arguments. And what I recommend is that, I did say to my husband, I'm not controlling what you eat outside the home. Number one, vegan home. That was the thing, vegan home. I would say, like, if your spouse or partner wants to eat something else other than the raw food dish that you've prepared, then at least it be vegan, so that it be a vegan home, but that you don't control what that person eats outside of the home. So there should be some kind of an agreement like that.
Well, that's challenging because I mean, it can go either way. Like I hear what you're saying, that's a good thing, but if the other spouse agrees, but if they don't agree, it's like,
They might not agree. And so then you have to think, okay, that person doesn't agree with me. How, how important is this to me?
it's challenging enough to say like, oh, if we leave children with the grandparents, they might give them some candy, but when it's your own spouse and they might give them some candy, then it's like a big challenge.
That's a big challenge. That's a big challenge. That was definitely for me, that was out of boundary. My husband didn't go there. He's not a big sweet person. So, and he's not very much into junk food, um, in terms of the sweets, the refined sugars. But it was still very, very challenging. And
And
there were a lot of fights about it.
and
So I
yeah.
really try to help people educate. Like, one of the really good things about my husband was that over the years of me going out and speaking, because I've presented at many veg fests, vegan festivals, fruit festivals, and just talks locally, and he would come. He would come. It took him many, many years just to go vegetarian, but he's been vegetarian now for like 25
Oh
years.
wow, yeah.
And now he's mostly vegan. Like, at home in the house, he's vegan. He doesn't even really want to have anything that has anything to do with an animal. He understands that now. And a lot of that understanding came from going to these festivals and these talks that I did. Because when somebody gets educated, they want to make changes. And I'm seeing this in people who I work with. I just finished working with two women who made so much progress in 2 months of raw food coaching that it's changed their life. They lost weight, their digestion improved, their skin, the cystic acne went away, depression went away, like so many positive changes. And they are feeling so good and have so much energy that their husbands are like, I want this too. Their husbands are trying it for a month. Both
Wow.
of their husbands are trying it for a month. One of them, in fact, just finished a month, and he's like, I think I love it. I think I'm going to do it for a second month and see if I want to stay
Wow.
with this. So I think that we have a better chance of helping our family members if they are open to getting educated. Maybe not by us, maybe by somebody else. Maybe it's watching a movie. There are some really, really good movies out there. What the Health, Forks Over Knives, things like that, to educate about the importance of whole food vegan and why that's so important. And then also the benefits of raw food, taking them to a vegan or raw food festival or fruit festival, and just helping them to see that this is not going to harm them, and that a lot of the things that they have been told and indoctrinated into are harming them.
Sure. Now, just to clarify this, would you agree it's not really about vegan or meat eating when it comes to a marriage? It's about, look, we have this major difference in the house and we got to come to some sort of conclusion. And we're just, for us, it happened to be for yourself, vegan versus non-vegan, but it could have easily have been alcohol versus hamburgers or smoking cigarettes versus not smoking cigarettes. We're not here
Absolutely.
telling everybody it's all about vegan or not. It's how the two spouses make it work when they have two different outlooks on this. Maybe the guy wants to smoke cigarettes in the house and the wife's like not in the house or something. So it's not about necessarily the food, it's about making or figuring out how it could work, even though you have such a different understandings of these things. And not everyone's successful at this. This is probably the cause of some divorces, but I got to give it
Definitely.
to you and your husband. You stuck through it through the years, and now you're coming to see more closely together the same view, and it's a breath of fresh air to know you all these years and to see that you pulled it out and figured it out and made a way to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everybody should try to stick it out if it is really bad in the home, because I don't think it's healthy for children to grow up in an angry environment. So I think you have to look at the situation and see, is it, is it going to be beneficial to stick it out or not? And how strong you are in terms of dealing with that, because if you're really passionate about this and you're getting benefits from it that you see very clearly, uh, I think it makes it much more difficult when you really are so determined.
Yeah, I would say from a standpoint of like alcohol in the house or smoking, these are direct effects to the person next to you, like especially smoking. But with food, it's kind of tricky, like I told my spouse, look, you can eat whatever you feel you need to eat, but this is the way I'm eating. If you don't bother me, I'm not going to bother you. But then when you get kids in the mix, then it becomes more challenging and complicated.
Definitely, definitely
Yeah.
does. Definitely
So
does. And
that,
I had a child who was healing, and I wasn't about to have dairy in my house. My husband would have loved to have dairy in my house.
yeah,
No way. Wasn't going to have it.
because you knew. Yeah.
Yes. And so I drew the line there. He was okay to eat it outside of the house, but it got complicated also going on vacations because he felt like vacations, like we have to be flexible. We're on a vacation. I still remember that word flexible. And I said to him, I'm not flexible when it comes to asthma. I'm not flexible.
Yeah.
So we did talk about it, and I do recommend that people talk about it, show films, get books, have the books around the house. Even if the person doesn't look at it, he or she knows that there is some good information out there
How
on
about
this
this
topic.
one? So people like you've made the change after you got married. So what about people that are dating or thinking about marriage, but they can't see the eye to eye on this topic? Would you suggest that might not be the person for you? You're asking for problems later in life when you have children and stuff? Or would you say, don't let that affect such an important decision in your life? What would you say to people that aren't married but like considering marriage when it comes to that?
Yeah, another really good question. I would say to really go out of your way to find someone who is like-minded, because your life will just be a lot easier, especially if you decide to have children. If you're deciding not to have children, or if you're older and you've already had your kids, then sure, you could just find somebody who you like a lot of qualities about them. But if you're planning on having children and you want to raise them in a certain healthy lifestyle, like if you want them to be whole foods vegan and raw, it might not happen. And that might bring up a lot of controversy between you and your spouse.
Well,
And
it's
so
interesting.
I would say to look to find somebody, but if you don't, and you end up marrying somebody, I would say to start bringing up the conversation about how you're going to raise your kids, that is really crucial. My daughter did not marry a vegetarian. She married somebody who is just, he's a very special guy. He's a great, great guy. He's a wonderful dad, loves his kids, but he is not only is he not raw, he's not vegan, he's not vegetarian, he eats a lot of meat. So it didn't work out that way. She was thinking differently than him in that area, and she feeds her kids a lot of healthy food, and it's the best that she can do right now. I put my foot down. I made it clear that that was the most important thing for me, that there were other things that weren't quite as important, but that was very important to me, especially with healing. When it came to healing, because of the fact that my son had the asthma, the ear infections, and I had the skin issues and the digestive issues. So I've seen healing in all of those areas, and it just speaks to me, and I wasn't going to have it any other way.
Now, do you think it's
Um,
fair? Do you think it's fair that if you, let's say two people are eating junk food together, they get married, and then one of them changes and then starts demanding this house is going to be a healthy house now. Considering they made that commitment when they were both eating junk food, do you think it's fair to that the one that wants to stay in a junk food that that he has to change? I mean, I understand why, but do you think it's
yes,
fair
I
considering?
think that it's a matter of having discussions about it, and just making it clear, because people do change. And I think in our relationships that we have to expect change. Not everything is going to be status quo like it was at the very beginning. And I think also telling the person, I'm not saying that you can never eat it. I'm just saying that in front of the children, I want them to be healthy. I don't want them eating all this junk food.
Yeah, I think it's very important what you said is to understanding and acknowledging anyone who's going to get married or not, that people do change. You might marry a raw vegan and they might end up in cooked food. You
That's right.
they might switch to the carnivore or some people do change, but I think the key to a successful marriage is to work through those changes and and you've shown it could be successful. So something's very
Yeah.
important to you and to your husband as well.
Yeah,
He
I
stuck
think
in
for my
there, hung in
husband
there.
also, one of the reasons that he started to make his own personal changes was because he saw people who I was working with who had some really huge challenges. Like one woman I worked with 10 years ago came to me with breast cancer, and my husband saw her situation turn around. She's still alive today and thriving, and he sees these things. He's seen people who have diabetes, and I've worked with a number of people with diabetes, and he's seen in like a month and a half their A1C level, their marker for diabetes, is in the normal range. I tell him these things. He sometimes overhears me talking.
Sure.
And I think that, he's getting older now. He wants to have a healthy life. So I think that that has brought him to eat big salads and want to try my smoothies and eat way more fruit. So even though I don't tell him what to add, he's been adding a lot more just because he knows it's good for him.
That's the challenge because of what you and I, what we do. We meet so many people that are sick, and we also meet a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people that listen to us when it comes to this, and they get well. But those people that do not see that, like your husband got to see it, but the people that do not, when they first approach you, or they might not even approach you, like my family's really sick and I want to help them, or I have friends that are sick, you want to help them, and they don't see it, so maybe it's understandable, but they just listen to the mass media, and you can literally tell them, I've worked with 10 people, and all 10 of them got off diabetic medicine. I've worked with 10 people with cancer, and everyone that listened to me got better. They still will not even consider it because their doctor said no or
That's
something
right.
else. or somebody,
That's right. It's a combination of being indoctrinated into it through the medical establishment, as well as the addiction of the food itself. There
Yeah,
are
yeah,
scientists out
yeah,
there who their main purpose is to make the food addictive. And that's why there's so much MSG hidden labeling, monosodium glutamate hidden labeling. Like years ago, before I went raw vegan, I would look at a package and see hydrolyzed vegetable protein and think that was healthy. It's got the word vegetable in
yeah.
it. That's hidden MSG, monosodium glutamate, an excitotoxin.
Yeah,
It causes attention deficit disorder. It causes autism. It's crazy that people are not educated when they go to school. They're not educated about what's in their food. That's not in health class. We're not being educated about any of these things.
yeah. Well, I'm glad you're educated about it and you wrote these books. I'm so glad you took the time to write them. Everybody, Karen's links are below the video in the description. Get these books, and if you want some coaching, get in touch with her because she's definitely qualified. She has the experience. I personally know her. I interview a lot of people, but I probably know Karen better than any of those people and longer than any of those. We got into this together, and for a long time. I'm glad to know you, and I'm so glad to see you're successful at this, and you're helping so many people. But that's the most important thing. You're helping so many people. So keep up the great work, and thank you for taking the time to
Thank you,
come on here.
Paul.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that we have such a history with this lifestyle. We go
Yes.
way back to the 90s. And we were two of the people who really stuck with this. It
Yeah.
became our mission in life.
Yeah. It's amazing how people figure this out, they'll get better. And I just can't even understand how they can go back to going doing what they were doing when they got sick. But a lot of people end up doing that. Or they get too smart for themselves and then they start going on some other crazy type of carnivore or something. But you and
Right.
I have stuck it out, and here we are. And I'm staying. I mean, I'm loving this, and it's
I
great.
think it gets better as we get older.
I feel better than ever. And the one time over the years that I tried to go back, I got sick, and I said, all these years I've been eating this way, and I felt great, and I'm not gonna do it. So we have to learn the hard
That's
way.
why I don't even go there because I remember. I remember being sick. I remember my skin was awful, so embarrassing, so painful for so many years. And being told all those years that diet and lifestyle made no difference. And then when I made that big change, especially going raw vegan in 1994, and 3 months for my skin to heal and the scarring, everything gone. It was just incredible. And my digestion, I was so constipated and it was just all gone. Like that's the past. And I look back at it and sometimes I think, wow, really incredible the lies that are out there,
Yeah,
that
so
people
many
are
lies,
just not told the truth.
so many lies. And besides my physical uh, health that I feel amazing, the people I went to school with, in these days you can keep in touch with all of these people on social media. So like it's a little different because back uh back then before that, people don't lose touch with somebody. They don't know, maybe in a crazy situation, somebody would bump into one person. But now I can keep touch with or at least view all the people I went to school with. And I see all of them like they're like different people. They're sick, they're overweight, they're tired, and many of them are dying. And I say, well, now I you could really tell the difference because it's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Decades later, you
It
see
pays
what's
off. It's
really
an investment
happening.
in your
Yeah.
health. Yeah. Well, Karen, thank you again so much. We'll definitely want to have you on again. Everybody, put your comments and questions below, and please contact Karen and check out her website. I'll put it below. Excellent information. Get her books, and the recipe book is wonderful. I have it. I love it. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. Yes, and anybody who is interested in any of my work, like check out Feel Fabulous with Food and superhealthychildren.com.
Yeah. So there's the two sites. There's feelfabulous with foods.com and superhealthychildren.com. Right?
Yes, feel fabulous with food.
Yeah, with food.com. And then,
Yes.
okay, and then creatinghealthychildren.com.
Superhealthychildren.com.
Super healthy children, not just healthy children, super healthy children.
That's
All
right.
right. Thank you. The links are below, everybody. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and a great world life.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.